Jerry Reed was viewed by everyone as a crazy guy with a guitar, a smile, and a voice that could make depressing situations humorous. He resembled the Snowman from Smokey and the Bandit in both appearance and speech. He was a big, crazy rebel from the South who was always picking things up and dropping them. Beneath all that laughter, however, was a guy growing increasingly silent. There was a difference in his final days. The music ceased. The grin vanished. Additionally, Jerry saw and spoke things in the final 24 hours of his life that no one else could explain. In the corner of his hospice room was a silent camera that continued to roll. Something that was never supposed to be seen was captured. However, nothing about Jerry's final moments would ever feel normal again. Everything will change depending on what happens next. Jerry Reed was a formidable force in the past, before the silent tape and the man in the hospice room. When he was younger, he used anything with strings to make noise. In 1937, he was born in Atlanta, Georgia. Reed was reared by a single mother in the 1930s. He escaped with rhythm. When he was in his teens, he was not only playing guitar, he was leading it. His fingertips moved like fire, and no one else could quite replicate it. Jerry was outstanding, according to one of the greatest guitarists of all time, Chet Atkins. Not because he was smooth, but rather because he was unpredictable, harsh, and fast. For Elvis Presley, Jerry had penned hits like Guitar Man and You by the 1960s. S-Mail. He rose to fame in Nashville as a result of that effort. However, Reed never followed the guidelines. Amos Moses and When You're Hot, two of his own compositions, were sloppy, lively, and packed with bizarre tales. Then, in 1977, Smokey and the Bandit was released. Reed's role as Cletus Snowman, Snow made him renowned very soon. He was not acting. He was that person. The wink, the boots, the laugh. He even composed and performed Eastbound and Down, the film's theme song, in a single night. Then it became a song. Even at his prime, however, Reed never made an effort to gain notoriety. He said, "I'm just here to pick a little and tell a few lies." Once. It was cute, but maybe it was also a cover. The man behind all the enthusiasm worked constantly, sometimes excessively. 42 times, his recorder captured the identical guitar line. His frequent withdrawal was seen by friends, who saw him pacing backstage before performances, ignoring calls, and cutting short visits. Before a recording, one session musician claimed to have spent 5 minutes looking into a mirror, as though he was waiting for it to blink back. But nobody pressed. The legend of a famous outlaw was true of him. The business community referred to it as odd. However, those identical stories looked completely different when the video was released years later. Were these signs, or were they just strange coincidences? Because Jerry's body was slower than the spirits. In the early 2000s, Jerry Reed's wild energy began to wane. Something inside of him was starting to crack, yet he still felt like the Snowman and was still laughing and joyful. They were worn out by years of heavy smoking, late nights, and endless tours. Despite being diagnosed with asthma, he quickly began experiencing heart and lung issues. In public, he kept things light. In his own mind, however, his universe began to shrink despite his jokes. "Don't worry. I'm not leaving. I'm just lowering the speed." The man who used to rip up stages with a six-string was so out of breath that he could not go across a room. His voice became weaker and raspier as he grew older, but there was a deeper cause. He canceled all of his engagements after first canceling gigs and then interviews. Friends no longer received a response when they called. When people stopped by, the doors were locked. Jerry was proud, but not of his wealth or accolades, according to close friend Bobby Bear. He didn't want people to see him that way. He took pride in his strength. However, strength was insufficient. In 2007, he was sent to a private facility outside of Nashville. The official purpose was to monitor the situation. It was a roundabout farewell. As the man they knew gradually dwindled, his girls visited him frequently and sat peacefully by his side. But it was more than his body. He continued to switch between things that no one could really identify. The strange behavior began to be noticed by the nurses. Jerry talked to those who weren't present. One individual claimed that he would repeatedly say, Tell the man, I'm not ready. Someone more claimed to have witnessed him slowly shaking his head while gazing into the corridor as if observing a storm. They believed it was due to the fog associated with dying or the medication. Then came the dreams. Intelligent ones. Risky ones. He gasped and cried the following morning. He's in the room again. The doctors advised the staff to keep his room dark and quiet and gave him stronger sleep aids. But it didn't appear to help. He was not afraid. He waited as though something or someone might happen. His daughter then did something she thought she wouldn't regret since she was anxious. She placed a recording camera in the corner of his room. Out of fear and compassion, Judy Reed's daughter placed a tiny camera in the upper corner of his hospice room. It was merely a standard home video camera that was set to continuously record. It lacked night vision and motion detection. According to the family, it was done to ensure everyone's safety and that the nurses were performing their duties. Her closest friends and family, however, have different opinions. She demanded evidence. There was evidence that her dad wasn't imagining what he was saying. The filming started in late August 2008. Initially, nothing odd was observed. Sleeping for long, peaceful hours while nurses come and leave in shifts. Jerry barely moved. Occasionally, he would get up to cough or write in a notepad beside his bed. One night, he stumbled over some of Coco Joe's phrases. Another night, he said, "Don't open the door if it knocks twice." Other than that, it was the slow, silent decline of a man whose music used to fill stadiums. Till August 31st, at precisely 2:47 a.m., an odd thing happened. The camera had been continuously filming until Jerry suddenly sat up in bed. There was a jarring, unsettling silence, and nothing was moving or producing sound. His eyes were wide open, staring directly into the far dark wall. He wasn't bothered by it. He remained silent. Not initially. After 13 seconds of silence, he said clearly, "I know who you are." After 5 more seconds of staring at her, he carefully stood up. No warning was given. The room was empty of a nurse. Additionally, when personnel reviewed the hospital logs, nothing odd was found. His lungs and heart were healthy. He was unable to recall it the following morning. The motion monitor in the room never turned on. No one else had been there, according to the machine. Nevertheless, the blurry tape demonstrated something. Jerry was not dreaming. When he spoke, he was thinking of something or someone. Eventually, that clip would be the sole file left from that night. The rest would vanish for reasons no one could fathom. And that was only the beginning of what was on that recording. Hey, August 31st, 2008 was a very busy day, and it was the last full day of Jerry Reed's life. When he woke up that morning, he was more awake than he had been in weeks, even though he had been slept for days. He was concentrated, according to the nurses. His voice was gentle, but it carried more weight than it has in weeks, according to his daughter. She recalled, "It seemed like he had something to do, like he was waiting for the go-ahead." That afternoon, Jerry made 3 phone calls. It was sent to his longtime director, Bill Justice. "We don't know what was stated. That's all I have to say." Justice subsequently told a reporter all he needed was to hear a voice he knew. The last call, from an unknown number, was the scariest. No name, message, or address was provided, and it lasted 11 minutes. The other person is unknown. The second call was to an old friend and bandmate, name hidden, and it ended in 49 seconds. According to hospital records, Jerry hung up in the middle of a statement. When asked, the family said that the call no longer exists. That night after work, Jerry asked for a paper, and he wrote a lot of his songs on the spot. He used to write lines and chord changes in the margins of hotel Bibles between shows, but this time he only wrote one line, 8 words long. "The man without fingers plays the last note." He gave his daughter a small smile and whispered, "He's been waiting a long time." That was the last thing Jerry Reed wrote. The notebook was lost sometime during the night. It was next to his bed. The staff didn't touch it, and the family didn't see it. By the following morning, it was gone. The hospital staff said it might have been thrown away with laundry or sheets, but the security log indicated that no one had been in the room between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. Morning. He said nothing else. According to all reports, the Those final calls and one odd sentence were the last things he did that made sense. There was no more moving, no more music, just the hum of tools, the soft beep of monitors, and the ticking of the clock. However, there was also another ticking, because a few hours later, while everyone was asleep, something terrible happened in room 14 that caused all the machines in the building to stop working. Most hospices don't have power outages, and systems are equipped with circuit separation, generators, and surge protectors to make them more dependable. To be precise, room 14 went dark at 3:13 a.m. Not the entire building, not even the entire floor. That one room, one plug, one lens, one man. The hospital staff didn't notice anything at first. Heart monitors are battery-operated. His body was already motionless. The change didn't make any noise. However, when the nurse arrived at 3:21 to check on him, the camera's red light was off, the tape was no longer playing, the screen was blank, and he was gone. It was confirmed by the system log. The power abruptly went out at precisely 3:13 and was restored after 57 seconds. The switch was unharmed. No glass was broken. The cameras in all other rooms were still functioning properly. The tech help team was unable to provide an explanation, and nothing became overheated. They didn't unplug it. It just died, the tech said, and then it came back the same as before. When a video was viewed again, the final frame visible before the darkness revealed Jerry lying motionless with his hands folded and his eyes closed. A few nurses reported that the temperature in the room dropped very quickly around the same time, and one person claimed that the clock in the passage skipped ahead, going from 3:12 to 3:14 without showing 3:13 at all. Peaceful. The strangest thing, though, was that there was a light. The wall behind him was flashing slowly and faintly, not strong enough to set off the motion sensor, but just strong enough to touch the edge of the frame. If you played the clip again, the light was gone, and Jerry was too. The official report stated that the person died of respiratory failure brought on by issues with their emphysema. She later said, "I didn't believe in that kind of thing, but I'm not going to walk down that hall by myself." That would have been the end of it. A flash that I can't explain. A peaceful death, until Jerry's daughter looked at the camera and saw something much worse. Nearly all of the video is gone. 2 weeks after Jerry's death, his daughter returned to the hospice to retrieve his belongings, and among them was the camcorder, which was still functioning and whole. When she got home, she plugged it in and began to consider what she thought would be a quiet but difficult farewell, but she found nothing. The dates on the camera's files were set up in order: August 29th, 30, and 31. The screen went black when she opened the folder marked September 1st, Jerry's last morning. She went backwards on the page to August 31st, the last day her dad was actually alive, but the entire folder was also gone, completely erased, not messed up, not broken, just left. It appeared as though the camera had never been on. The timestamp was correct, but there was something wrong with the film itself. There was no picture, no sound, and no comeback. There was one exception: a single 14-second clip with the time and date August 31st, 2:47 a.m., was concealed in a backup cache folder. At the same moment that Jerry got up and said, "I know who you are." That moment lived on. Nothing before. Nothing after that. She was afraid, so she took the device to a nearby tech repair shop, where he conducted some tests and concluded that it appeared as though the data had been manually erased, but there was no log or history of overwrites to prove this had occurred, as if those files had never been there. The webcam had not been touched and had no remote control or Wi-Fi. She played that one clip again to make sure it was the same, and there was Jerry Reed standing up and staring at something that was invisible. "I know you." Then there was silence. A group of experts was sent in, including forensic experts, video experts, and experts who study the paranormal. Each of them had a different theory: data loss, magnetic interference, or intentional damage. But none of them could address the primary question: why only that moment survived, and what had Jerry Reed actually seen? Because the music industry didn't want to talk about it, whatever it was. When a story of Jerry Reed's final moments began to surface, first in whispered conversations, and then in a series of blog posts and podcast episodes, people didn't react the way you might have expected them to. There was no sound, no anger, and strange, heavy silence, as if no one was surprised, as if they already knew. Close friends and seasoned industry professionals began to speak, but only in whispers. One on-call guitarist who had played with Reed in the early 1990s described a late-night drive after a show in Baton Rouge, during which Jerry had been looking out the window. He then said in a low voice, "Some things you play your way out of. Others, they stick with you." He wouldn't say what he meant when asked. Another friend claimed that as Jerry grew older, his interest in spiritual things, not faith, but things that are invisible, increased. He read books about events that happened very close to death, and at one point a nurse said he asked for a priest, but only if he didn't talk. In the Nashville scene, a story began to circulate about a seance that took place at a private party hosted by a strange group of artists in New Orleans in the late 1970s. What did someone call it? A harmless joke. Jerry didn't laugh, though, and he left the party early, vowing never to discuss it ever again. According to one bandmate, he only said that door wasn't supposed to open. No one was certain if this was true or merely a story. However, as the video surfaced and then vanished, and the one clip that remained was discussed in underground forums, people began to wonder, was Jerry insane, or was he being haunted? Psychologists believe that the final vision was simply a side effect of the medication and the patient's mental decline. Their mind was collapsing, combining memories and fears into one final hallucination. Others, however, said that he was clear, it was time. The most terrifying thing he said was, "The man with no fingers plays the last note." In Southern folklore, figures lacking hands or fingers frequently symbolize unpaid bills, angry ghosts, and elderly souls that are still connected to the living. Reed knew the song was over, but he didn't know who would play the last note. Jerry Reed didn't just walk into a room. He arrived in a firecracker-shaped alcohol jug, laughed a lot, talked fast, and played even faster. For many years, his admirers referred to him as the Snowman, the Guitar Man, and the Outlaw Poet. But when the lights went out and the music stopped, there was more to remember than hit songs and movie stars. The final day had arrived. One final line, and then there was quiet. It's so odd that no one can explain it. It was supposed to be quiet for Jerry Reed's final 24 hours. He was in hospice, surrounded by doctors, family, and the usual peace that comes with a man near the end of his life, but there were signs instead. It took 14 seconds. People say that clip, which hasn't been made public yet, shows Jerry Reed sitting up in bed with his eyes wide, as if someone had just walked in. Don't worry. There's no doubt. Nothing but quiet. Getting noticed. His 3 mysterious phone calls have been forgotten by history. We only know one terrifying line that he wrote. "The man with no fingers plays the last note." After that, it was quiet. We know that his camera went dark right before he died. All the footage from the day, hours of digital memory, was gone without a trace. The hospice staff said it was an echo, the usual passing. The machine said there was a breathing problem, and the record said it was normal, but those who knew Jerry well and witnessed his guarded demeanor in his final years say it felt different, too quiet, way too good, like something had come after him and only taken what it came for. The camera files are unrecoverable. The unknown number he called that day didn't work. The hallway light flickered during the power outage, and the business community has yet to comment. News began to circulate in Nashville, where rumors circulated that Jerry had discussed a shadow that had followed him since 1978, that he believed he had let something in on a strange night in New Orleans, that he would pray aloud in the changing rooms, but not to God, but to someone else, and that friends dismissed it as showbiz weirdness. In retrospect, however, those stories seem like pieces of something much larger and scarier, made all the more frightening by the fact that Jerry wasn't typically afraid, but rather insane, made jokes louder, and sped through life as if the next morning didn't matter. At the very end, when his body was weak and his voice was barely audible, he finally spoke clearly. "He's been waiting a long time. I know you." That wasn't a dying man high on drugs and lost. It took that man years to finally admit what he had been avoiding. He didn't appear afraid. His daughter subsequently told him. He appeared to have stopped jogging. We might be most concerned about that in those final hours, Jerry Reed wasn't attempting to hang on. He had no intention of reaching out. He was accomplishing something. we will never be able to fully comprehend it. His music has remained constant throughout the years. The licks, the words. It was amusing. The dark humor of Amos Moses or the excitement of Eastbound and Down attract new admirers to him every day. However, those who are familiar with the details of his final hours are compelled to listen in a different way. Each note has a little extra weight. Every halt ought to be a bit longer. The song sounds more and more like a man battling an invisible foe with each line. Did it involve guilt? Are you depressed? Is this insane? Or did it actually happen? The guy without fingers is a ghost in legends. Something. He is unable to perform the music, but he waits for someone capable of doing it. And he gets paid when they do, when the final song comes on. We may never know what Jerry Reed witnessed. Perhaps he made it up. It could have been a dream. Is there a logical explanation buried deep within? But you have to question, given the way he sat up, the way he spoke, and the fact that only that one tape was presented. Jerry isn't the only one, but about what each of us has planned.